Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Unwelcome Truth. Gordon Mackey had built his life on precision. Every decision calculated, every relationship measured, every trust earned through blood and sweat. At 42, he commanded respect in the construction industry not through charm, but through an unwavering reputation. Cross Gordon Mackey once, and you never got a second chance. The October evening started like any other. Gordon sat in his leather chair, reviewing blueprints for his latest commercial development project when the front door opened. Melody's voice echoed through their suburban Chicago home, followed by smaller footsteps. "Gordon, honey, come meet someone special." He set down his reading glasses and walked to the foyer, where his wife of 16 years stood beside a young girl with auburn hair and piercing green eyes. The child, maybe 14 or 15, clutched a small duffel bag and looked around nervously. "This is Ruby," Melody said, her voice carrying an odd tension. "She's Loretta's daughter. She'll be staying with us for a while." Gordon studied the girl's face, something nagging at the back of his mind. Ruby had the same sharp jawline as his younger sister, the same way of tilting her head when uncertain. But it was impossible. Melody had suffered 3 miscarriages during their marriage, and they'd stopped trying years ago. "How long is a while?" Gordon asked, his voice neutral, but his eyes never leaving Ruby's face. "Loretta's going through a difficult divorce," Melody explained quickly. "Ruby needs stability while things get sorted out." Ruby shifted uncomfortably, and that's when Gordon saw it. A silver bracelet on her thin wrist. Even from across the room, he could make out the engraved letters. His heart stopped. "That's a beautiful bracelet," he said, keeping his tone casual. "Where did you get it?" Ruby looked down at her wrist, then back up with innocent eyes. "My real mom gave it to me when I was little. It says Ruby, but I've never actually met her. The people who raised me said she couldn't keep me." Gordon's hands began to tremble, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it threatened to consume him. He recognized that bracelet because he'd had it made 15 years ago, a custom piece from a jeweler downtown. He'd given it to Melody when she told him she was pregnant with their first child, the child they'd supposedly lost. "That's lovely," Gordon managed, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "Melody, could I speak with you in the kitchen for a moment?" Melody's face went pale, but she nodded. "Ruby, why don't you go upstairs? First door on the right will be your room for now." As Ruby climbed the stairs, Gordon watched her movements. Every gesture, every step confirmed what his mind refused to accept. This girl wasn't just familiar. She was his. The child he grieved for 15 years was alive, raised by strangers while his wife had lied to his face every single day since. In the kitchen, Melody busied herself with unnecessary tasks, avoiding his gaze. "Loretta's daughter," Gordon said quietly. "Interesting coincidence, don't you think?" "What do you mean?" Melody's voice cracked. "I mean that bracelet I had made for our daughter. The one you were wearing when you told me we lost her." Gordon stepped closer, and Melody instinctively backed against the counter. "The same bracelet that girl is wearing upstairs." Melody's composure cracked. "Gordon, I can explain." "No." His voice cut through her words like a blade. "You don't get to explain. Not yet. First, you're going to tell me exactly how my daughter ended up in this house tonight. And then you're going to tell me why I spent 15 years believing she was dead." The kitchen fell silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. Gordon had always prided himself on his control, but tonight, something fundamental had shifted. The man who never forgave was about to discover just how deep betrayal could run. And Melody Mackey was about to learn that some lies cost everything. Chapter 2. Foundations of Deception. 16 years earlier, Gordon Mackey had been a different man. Not soft. Never soft, but hopeful in a way that success hadn't yet burned out of him. He just started Mackey Construction with 2 employees and a single truck, working 18-hour days to build something lasting. Melody Ward had been a waitress at the diner where he grabbed coffee every morning at 5 a.m. Beautiful, charming, and seemingly impressed by his ambition. Their courtship was swift, their marriage even swifter. Gordon thought he'd found a partner who understood his drive, someone who wanted to build an empire together. He'd been wrong about many things, but never more wrong than about Melody. Now, standing in their million-dollar kitchen, Gordon watched his wife of 16 years struggle to find words. The overhead lights cast harsh shadows across her face, revealing lines of guilt he'd somehow missed for over a decade. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way," Melody whispered, her hands shaking as she gripped the marble countertop. "When I found out I was pregnant, you were working so much, trying to get the business off the ground." "Don't." Gordon's voice was deadly quiet. "Don't you dare make this about my work." Melody flinched but continued. "I was lonely, Gordon. You left at dawn and came home after midnight. I met someone who paid attention to me. Jason O'Connor." It wasn't a question. Gordon had always suspected something during those early years, the way Melody would mention her friend Loretta's brother just a little too often. "How did you?" "I'm not an idiot, Melody. I just chose to trust my wife." Gordon moved to the kitchen island, placing his hands flat on the surface. "Tell me about Ruby." Melody's tears started then, but Gordon felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort. Just cold calculation. "When I realized I was pregnant, I didn't know. I couldn't be sure who the father was. You and Jason, you were both." She stopped at the look on Gordon's face. "Continue." "I thought it was yours. I really did. But when Ruby was born, and she had Jason's green eyes, his red hair," Melody's voice broke. "I panicked. I told you we lost her and gave her to a family in Wisconsin. Jason's cousin and his wife. They couldn't have children." Gordon processed this information with the same methodical approach he used for construction projects. Foundation first, then structure, then the details that would either support or destroy everything. "So for 15 years, my daughter has been living 3 states away while I mourned her death. While I watched you pretend to grieve alongside me." He looked up, and Melody stepped back at the expression in his eyes. "While you continued your affair with the man who might be her father." "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that." Gordon straightened, and despite being only average height, he seemed to fill the room with menace. "Tell me, Melody, how many times did you visit Ruby over the years? How many times did you watch my daughter grow up while I believed she was dead?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm. "Answer me." "Jason's cousin sends pictures sometimes. I've seen her maybe 4 or 5 times when I visited Loretta in Milwaukee." Melody's voice was barely audible. "She's been asking more questions lately about her birth parents. That's why she's here. The family that raised her thought it might be good for her to meet her biological mother's friend while they figure out how to tell her the truth." Gordon laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. "They have no idea who I am, do they? They think you're just a family friend, not her mother. And they certainly don't know about me." Melody shook her head. "And Jason? Does he know his daughter is sleeping upstairs in our house tonight?" "He doesn't know about tonight. He's been pushing for Ruby to learn the truth. He wants to be part of her life." Gordon nodded slowly, pieces of a plan already forming in his mind. Jason O'Connor had always been small-time, a charming drifter who worked construction when he needed money and disappeared when he didn't. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd taken something that belonged to Gordon Mackey. "Here's what's going to happen," Gordon said, his voice returning to the measured tone that had intimidated competitors for years. "Ruby is going to stay here as long as she wants. You're going to be the perfect hostess, the caring family friend. And you're going to call Jason tomorrow and tell him about our unexpected guest." "Gordon, what are you planning?" He looked at his wife, really looked at her, for what he knew would be the last time with any trace of the love he'd once felt. "I'm planning to give everyone exactly what they deserve," he said, starting with the truth. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked as Ruby moved around her temporary room, unpacking the few belongings she'd brought. Gordon listened to the sound of his daughter's footsteps and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Purpose beyond business, beyond success. He was going to get his daughter back, and he was going to destroy everyone who had stolen her from him. The game had begun, and Gordon Mackey never lost. Chapter 3: Blood and Blueprints. Ruby Mackey, though she didn't know that name belonged to her, was nothing like the shy, uncertain girl Gordon had first imagined. Over breakfast the next morning, She displayed a sharp intelligence and curiosity that reminded him painfully of himself at that age. "So you're in construction?" she asked, methodically eating the pancakes Melody had nervously prepared. "Like building houses?" "Commercial mostly," Gordon replied, studying her face in the morning light. The resemblance was even stronger now. She had his mother's nose, his grandfather's stubborn chin. "Office buildings, shopping centers, warehouses. That sounds complicated. Do you have to know math and engineering and stuff?" "Quite a bit, yes." "Do you like math?" Ruby's face lit up. "I love it. My parents, they always said I was too smart for my own good." She glanced at Melody, who was washing dishes with unnecessary intensity. "Mrs. Mackey, you never mentioned you knew my mom before." Melody's hands stilled on the plate she was scrubbing. "It was a long time ago," Melody said carefully. "We weren't close friends, just acquaintances who stayed in touch." Gordon watched this exchange with the detached interest of a predator studying prey. Every lie Melody told was another nail in her coffin, and she was building that coffin with impressive efficiency. His phone buzzed. A text from his foreman, Cameron Klein. "O'Connor showed up this morning asking about work. Want me to hire him on the Riverside project?" "Perfect timing." "Ruby," Gordon said, pocketing his phone, "how would you like to see a construction site today? I need to check on one of my projects." "Really? That would be amazing." "Melody, why don't you come along? And maybe invite Loretta to meet us there." "I'd love to finally meet Ruby's mother." The color drained from Melody's face. "I don't think that's necessary. I insist." Gordon's tone brooked no argument. "Family should stick together, don't you think?" 2 hours later, Gordon stood at the edge of the Riverside commercial complex, watching Ruby explore the construction site with the enthusiasm of someone discovering a new world. She peppered Cameron with questions about steel beams and foundation work, displaying an intuitive understanding of structural engineering that made Gordon's chest tight with pride and rage. She should have been asking him these questions years ago. She should have grown up in his house, learned these skills at his side, inherited the empire he was building. Instead, she'd been hidden away like a dirty secret while he grieved a daughter who was very much alive. "Boss," Cameron approached, hard hat in hand. "O'Connor's over by the crane if you want to talk to him." Gordon nodded, his eyes finding Jason O'Connor immediately. Tall, still handsome despite 43 years of hard living, with the same green eyes and auburn hair that Ruby had inherited. He was laughing with some of the crew, that easy charm on full display that had once stolen Gordon's wife and daughter. "Keep an eye on Ruby," Gordon told Cameron. "And when Melody arrives with her friend Loretta, make sure they stay near the trailer." Gordon walked across the site with the measured pace of a man who owned everything in sight. Workers nodded respectfully as he passed. Gordon Mackey's reputation for fairness was matched only by his reputation for ruthlessness when crossed. "Jason," he called out as he approached. "Good to see you again." Jason turned, his smile faltering slightly when he recognized Gordon. They'd worked together briefly years ago, before Jason's wandering nature had led him elsewhere. "Gordon Mackey, heard you were doing well for yourself." Jason gestured at the construction around them. "This is all yours." "One of several projects," Gordon replied modestly. "I understand you're looking for work. Times have been tough, you know how it is." Gordon didn't know. He'd made a point of knowing Jason's employment history, his financial struggles, his pattern of jumping from job to job whenever things got serious or complicated. "I might have something for you," Gordon said. "Skilled labor, good pay. Long-term project if you're interested in staying put for once." Jason's eyes lit up. "That sounds perfect. When can I start?" "Tomorrow, if you'd like." "There's just one thing. I'm having a small barbecue this weekend at my house. Team building, you know. You should come. Bring anyone special in your life." "That's generous of you, Gordon. I'll be there." From across the site, Gordon heard Ruby's delighted laughter as Cameron showed her how to read architectural plans. The sound was pure joy, unmarred by the deception that had shaped her entire life. Soon, Jason would discover that his daughter was sleeping under Gordon's roof. Soon, Melody would have to face both her husband and her lover while pretending to be just a family friend to the child they'd stolen from him. And soon, Ruby would learn the truth about her parents, all of it. Gordon watched Jason walk away, whistling cheerfully, completely unaware that he'd just accepted an invitation to his own destruction. The man had made one fundamental error in judgment 15 years ago. He'd underestimated Gordon Mackey's capacity for patience. But patience, Gordon had learned, was just another word for planning. And his plan was finally ready to begin. The barbecue was going to be very interesting indeed. Chapter 4. Gathering Storms. Saturday morning brought an unseasonably warm October day, perfect for the barbecue Gordon had planned with surgical precision. He'd spent the week watching Ruby settle into his home, observing her habits, learning her personality. She was brilliant, funny, and had inherited his competitive streak, traits that made his stolen years with her even more painful. But pain, Gordon had learned, was excellent fuel for revenge. "Are you sure about all these people coming over?" Melody asked nervously as she arranged outdoor furniture. "Ruby's still adjusting." "Ruby's fine," Gordon interrupted, watching his daughter help Cameron set up the grill. She'd insisted on learning how it worked, approaching the task with the same methodical curiosity she brought to everything. She likes meeting new people. It was true. Over the past week, Ruby had charmed everyone she'd encountered. The mailman, the neighbors, even Tyler Wells, Gordon's usually gruff accountant who'd stopped by with quarterly reports and ended up teaching Ruby about compound interest. Besides, Gordon continued, "Isn't it time she met her biological father?" Melody went rigid. "What are you talking about? Jason should be here any minute." Along with Loretta and her family, Tyler and his wife, Cameron and his girlfriend, Vincent Carney from the bank. Gordon ticked off names like items on a shopping list. Quite the gathering. "Gordon, you can't." "Can't what? Have a barbecue? Introduce my employees to the daughter I've been getting to know?" His voice was pleasant, conversational, but Melody had learned to fear that tone over the years. The doorbell rang, and Ruby bounded toward the house. "I'll get it." Through the window, Gordon watched Jason O'Connor step into his foyer, looking around with undisguised curiosity at the obvious wealth on display. Ruby was chattering about the construction site, about how cool it was to see buildings being born from nothing. "Mr. O'Connor," Ruby called out. "Mr. Mackey said you work construction too. Do you know about foundation work?" Gordon couldn't hear Jason's response, but he saw the man's face go pale as he really looked at Ruby for the first time. The recognition was instant and devastating. Jason was staring at his own features reflected in a 15-year-old girl. "Oh no," Melody whispered. "Gordon, please." "Please what?" "Please continue protecting the man who helped you steal my daughter? Please keep lying to Ruby about who her parents are?" Gordon's voice remained calm, but his eyes were ice. "Those days are over, Melody." Jason stumbled into the backyard, his face ashen. Ruby had already moved on to greet Cameron's girlfriend, Kayla Hand, leaving Jason to process what he'd just discovered alone. "Gordon," Jason's voice cracked. "That girl in there. Beautiful, isn't she? Smart as a whip, too. Melody's been telling everyone she's a friend's daughter, staying with us temporarily." Gordon handed Jason a beer with mock hospitality. "But you recognize her, don't you?" Jason's hand shook as he accepted the bottle. "How long have you known? About Ruby being alive?" "Since last Monday." "About you being her biological father?" "I've suspected for 15 years. Gordon's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "The question is, what are you planning to do about it?" Before Jason could answer, more guests arrived. Tyler Wells and his wife Beatrice, followed by Vincent Carney and his partner Ernie Davies. The backyard filled with conversation and laughter, a perfect suburban gathering that masked the drama unfolding beneath the surface. Gordon played the gracious host, introducing Ruby to everyone as a special young lady staying with us. He watched Jason struggle through small talk while stealing glances at the daughter he'd never known was his. He observed Melody trying to act normal while her world crumbled around her. "Dad," Ruby said, appearing at Gordon's elbow with a plate of burgers Cameron had grilled. The word hit like a physical blow. She'd been calling him that all week, having misheard Mr. Mackey and deciding the correction was unnecessary. "Dad!" Jason's voice was strangled. Ruby looked between the two men, sensing tension she didn't understand. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," Gordon said, his arms settling protectively around Ruby's shoulders. Jason was just asking about you. He's curious about your interests, your school, your life with your adoptive family. Oh, Ruby brightened. Are you interested in adoption? Because I could tell you all about it. My parents are great, but I've always wondered about my biological family. Jason looked like he might be sick. Oh, have you ever wanted to meet them? Your biological parents. Sometimes, Ruby admitted, especially lately. My mom, my adoptive mom, she always said my birth mother loved me, but couldn't keep me. And my birth father, she shrugged. I used to imagine he was someone important, someone who'd be proud of me if he knew I existed. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Tyler's wife laughing at something Cameron had said. Jason stared at Ruby with naked anguish, and Gordon felt a satisfaction so pure it was almost intoxicating. This was what betrayal cost. This was what happened when you stole from Gordon Mackey. Well, Gordon said cheerfully, perhaps someday you'll get to meet them. Family has a way of finding each other, don't you think? As if summoned by his words, Loretta McGuire appeared at the back gate with her husband and 2 young children. Gordon had been wondering when Melody's accomplice would arrive. Melody, Loretta called out, her voice overly bright. Sorry we're late. Traffic was... She stopped short when she saw Ruby. Another recognition. Another face going pale with shock and fear. Loretta, Gordon said warmly, so good to finally meet you. Melody's told me so much about your friendship. The web was complete now. All the players were present, all the lies exposed. Ruby stood in the center of it all, innocent and trusting, surrounded by the people who had shaped her life through deception. But that was about to change. Gordon Mackey was done with other people controlling his daughter's story. It was time for the truth, and it was time for consequences. The game was entering its final phase. Chapter 5, Unraveling Threads. The barbecue had devolved into a tense gathering of conspirators trying to act normal while their shared secrets stood among them, laughing and asking innocent questions. Gordon watched it all with the detached satisfaction of a chess master seeing his strategy unfold. Ruby had gravitated toward Tyler Wells, fascinated by his stories about financial planning and investment strategies. She absorbed information like a sponge, asking pointed questions that impressed the older man. She's got a head for numbers, Tyler told Gordon quietly. You thinking about college prep? Kid like this could go far in business. I'm definitely thinking about her future, Gordon replied, his eyes never leaving Ruby's animated face. She deserves every opportunity. Across the yard, Jason sat on a patio chair looking shell-shocked. Melody hovered nearby, shooting desperate glances between her husband and her lover, while Loretta made stilted conversation with the other guests. The weight of 15 years of deception was crushing them all, exactly as Gordon had planned. Mr. Mackey? Ruby appeared beside him, her face bright with excitement. Mr. Wells was telling me about compound interest, and I had this idea for a math project. Could I maybe visit your office sometime and see how you calculate costs for construction projects? Gordon's heart swelled with pride and pain. This brilliant, curious girl should have been in his office every weekend, learning the business that would someday be hers. I'd love that, he said. In fact, why don't you come by Monday after school? I'll show you how we bid on projects. Really? That would be amazing. Ruby threw her arms around his waist in a spontaneous hug that made Gordon's carefully controlled emotions threaten to break free. When she ran off to tell Cameron about her upcoming office visit, Gordon found Jason standing beside him. She's incredible, Jason said quietly, his voice thick with regret. All these years, I never knew. No, you didn't, Gordon agreed. You were too busy running from responsibility to wonder what happened to the consequences of your actions. Gordon, I need to tell her the truth. Do you? Gordon's voice was deceptively mild. And what truth would that be, Jason? That you seduced my wife 15 years ago? That when she got pregnant, you both decided it was easier to fake a miscarriage and give the baby away rather than deal with the complications? That my daughter has been calling strangers mom and dad, while her real father grieved her death? Jason flinched with each word. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Gordon's mask of civility finally slipped, revealing the rage beneath. You took my child, Jason. You stole 15 years of her life from me, and now you want to tell her the truth? For what? To ease your conscience. She has a right to know. She has a right to know that her father built a multi-million-dollar business from nothing. She has a right to know that she's heir to an empire. She has a right to know that someone has loved her every day of her life, even when he thought she was dead. Gordon stepped closer, and Jason involuntarily backed away. But she doesn't need to know that her biological father is a worthless drifter who abandoned her before she was born. You can't keep this from her forever. Watch me. The confrontation was interrupted by Melody's sharp intake of breath. Gordon followed her gaze to see Ruby deep in conversation with Loretta by the garden shed, their heads bent together over something in Loretta's purse. "Oh no," Melody whispered. Gordon strode across the yard with Jason trailing behind him. As they approached, he could hear Loretta's voice, strained and artificial. "Just some old photos from when your mother and I were younger. She was so beautiful, and she loved you so much." "Wait," Ruby said, her voice sharp with intelligence Gordon had come to recognize. "This woman in the pictures looks exactly like Mrs. Mackey." Loretta's face went white as Ruby held up a photograph, obviously one of Melody during her pregnancy 15 years ago. "And look," Ruby continued, studying the photo with the same methodical attention she brought to mathematical problems. "She's wearing my bracelet, the one my birth mother gave me." The silence that followed was deafening. Ruby looked from the photograph to Melody, her green eyes, Jason's eyes, wide with dawning realization. "Mrs. Mackey." Ruby's voice was small, uncertain. Are you my mother?" Gordon felt the moment crystallize around them like shattered glass. All his careful planning, all his strategic maneuvering, and the truth was coming out through a careless photograph and his daughter's sharp mind. But perhaps this was better. Perhaps Ruby discovering the truth herself was more poetic than any revenge he could have orchestrated. "Ruby," Melody's voice cracked. "I can explain." "Explain what?" Ruby's voice was rising, drawing attention from the other guests. "Explain why you've been pretending to be a family friend while I've been living in the same house as my biological mother. Explain why you let me call you Mrs. Mackey when you're actually my mom." Gordon watched his daughter process the deception, saw the intelligence that had drawn him to her twist into hurt and anger. This was the moment that would define the rest of Ruby's life, and he was not going to let anyone else control it. "Ruby," he said calmly, drawing her attention away from Melody's stammering explanations. "Come inside with me. Let's talk." She looked at him with those green eyes so like Jason's, but with an expression that was pure Gordon Mackey, calculating, unforgiving, and utterly focused. "Okay," she said quietly, "but I want the whole truth. All of it." As they walked toward the house, Gordon glanced back at the wreckage of the barbecue. Jason stood frozen in place. Melody was crying, and Loretta looked like she wanted to disappear entirely. The other guests were beginning to realize that they'd wandered into the middle of a family crisis. Perfect. It was time for Ruby to learn exactly who her father really was. And it was time for everyone else to learn what happened when you betrayed Gordon Mackey. The reckoning had begun. Chapter 6, Truth and Consequences. Gordon led Ruby into his study, the one room in the house that was truly his. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and the subtle scent of expensive cigars created an atmosphere of power and permanence. Ruby sat in the chair across from his desk, her posture rigid with barely controlled emotion. "How long have you known?" she asked without preamble. "Since the moment you walked into this house wearing that bracelet," Gordon replied honestly. "I had it made for your mother when she told me she was pregnant. She said we lost you in the second trimester." Ruby absorbed this information with the same methodical approach she brought to mathematical problems. "So for 15 years, you thought I was dead?" "Yes. And for 15 years, my actual mother has been lying to your face every single day." "Yes." Ruby was quiet for a long moment, staring at the family photos on Gordon's desk. Pictures of him and Melody at various company functions, vacation shots, anniversary celebrations. A life built on deception. "What about him?" she asked finally. "The man outside who keeps looking at me like he's seen a ghost." "Jason. He's my biological father, isn't he?" Gordon had prepared for this moment, but he found himself struggling with how much truth to share. Ruby deserved honesty, but she also deserved protection from the full ugliness of her origins. Genetically, probably, he said carefully, your mother was having an affair when she got pregnant. She couldn't be certain which of us was the father until you were born. And when she saw I had his eyes and hair, she panicked and gave me away rather than face the consequences. Yes. Ruby stood and walked to the window, looking out at the guests milling around the backyard. Gordon could see her mind working, processing emotions and information with frightening efficiency. What kind of man is he? She asked. Jason, I mean. This was the moment Gordon had been waiting for. The chance to ensure Ruby understood exactly what kind of people had shaped her life through their selfishness. Jason O'Connor is charming, unreliable, and has never committed to anything long-term in his life, Gordon said. He drifts from job to job, relationship to relationship. He's worked for me twice over the years, and both times he left without notice when something more interesting came along. And he never tried to find me? Never wondered what happened to the baby he might have fathered. Not once. Ruby nodded slowly, her reflection in the window showing a face that looked far older than 15. So my biological mother gave me away to hide her affair, and my biological father couldn't be bothered to care what happened to me. Ruby, but you. She turned to face him, and Gordon was struck by the steel in her young face. You grieved for me. You thought I was dead, and you mourned me. Every day. And now that you know I'm alive, what do you want? The question hung between them like a challenge. Gordon had planned elaborate schemes of revenge, complex plots to destroy the people who had betrayed him. But faced with his daughter's direct gaze, all of that seemed suddenly less important than the simple truth. I want what I should have had 15 years ago, he said. I want to be your father. I want to teach you about the business I've built, show you the world I've created. I want to give you every opportunity you've been denied. Even though I might not actually be your biological daughter. Genetics don't make a father, Ruby. Love does. Commitment does. Being there does. Gordon's voice was firm. I loved you before you were born. I grieved you when I thought you were gone. And I love you now that I've found you again. That makes me your father in every way that matters. Ruby was quiet again, processing this declaration. Outside, Gordon could see the barbecue dissolving as guests made awkward excuses to leave. The confrontation was clearly visible through the windows. Melody crying, Jason pacing, Loretta trying to mediate. What happens now? Ruby asked. That depends on what you want, Gordon said. Your adoptive parents love you, and they've given you a good life. If you want to go back to Wisconsin and pretend none of this happened, I'll arrange it. But if you want to stay here, if you want to be part of this family, the real family you should have had from the beginning, then we'll make that happen too. And Ruby nodded toward the window. What happens to the people who lied to both of us for 15 years? Gordon smiled, and for the first time, Ruby saw the ruthlessness that had built his empire. What do you think should happen to them? Ruby was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled back, an expression that was pure Gordon Mackey. I think, she said slowly, that people who lie about something this important shouldn't get to control the story anymore. I couldn't agree more. Together, they walked back outside to face the wreckage of the barbecue. Most of the guests had left, but Jason, Melody, and Loretta remained, clearly waiting for some resolution to the crisis. Ruby, Melody approached with red-rimmed eyes. Please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain, Ruby said calmly. You gave me away as a baby to hide your affair, then spent 15 years lying to the man who thought I was dead. I understand perfectly, but I loved you. No, Ruby's voice was sharp. If you loved me, you would have found a way to keep me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have let Dad think I was dead. If you loved me, you would have told me the truth years ago instead of letting me call strangers Mom and Dad. Jason stepped forward hesitantly. Ruby, I know this is overwhelming, but I want you to know that if you had realized what? That actions have consequences? That sleeping with someone else's wife might result in pregnancy. Ruby's eyes were cold. I don't need anything from you, Mr. O'Connor. I never have. Gordon felt a surge of pride watching his daughter dismiss the people who had betrayed them both with such controlled disdain. She had inherited his ability to cut someone down to size with words alone. Now, Ruby continued, I think it's time for everyone to leave. Dad and I have things to discuss. The use of Dad, when referring to Gordon, combined with her dismissal of Jason, was a dagger to the heart of both her biological parents. Gordon could see them both crumble under the weight of Ruby's rejection. As the guilty parties gathered their things and made hasty exits, Ruby stood beside Gordon watching them go. I want to stay here, she said quietly. I want to learn the business. I want to be part of the family I should have had from the beginning. What about your adoptive parents? They love me, and I love them. But they lied to me too, didn't they? About who my mother was, about whether you existed. Ruby's voice was matter of fact. I think it's time I learned the difference between people who lie to protect themselves and people who sacrifice for the people they love. Gordon put his arm around his daughter's shoulders, feeling a completeness he hadn't experienced in 16 years. Welcome home, Ruby Mackey. The war was far from over, but Gordon had already won the most important battle. He had his daughter back, and she was choosing him over the people who had stolen her away. Everything else was just cleanup. Chapter 7. Building Empire. 6 months later, Gordon watched Ruby present her analysis of construction costs to the Mackey Construction Board of Directors with the pride of a man seeing his legacy secured. At 16, she understood project management and profit margins better than executives twice her age. The Riverside expansion project could be completed 14% under budget if we adjust the material procurement timeline. Ruby concluded, her presentation flawless. I prepared 3 alternative scenarios based on different supplier negotiations. The board members, seasoned construction veterans who had known Gordon for decades, looked impressed. Vincent Carney, Gordon's banker and longtime friend, leaned forward with interest. This assumes we can secure better steel prices, Vincent said. What's your confidence level on those negotiations? 87%, Ruby replied without hesitation. Dad's been teaching me about supplier relationships. The key is understanding that everyone has something they need more than money. Gordon smiled. In 6 months, Ruby had absorbed more about business than most people learned in years. She'd moved in permanently after a difficult but necessary conversation with her adoptive parents in Wisconsin. They'd been hurt, but understanding, recognizing that Ruby needed to explore her biological family relationships. More importantly, Ruby had shown no interest in maintaining contact with Melody or Jason. Both had tried repeatedly to establish relationships with her, but Ruby had dismissed their efforts with the cold efficiency Gordon had taught her. Family, she told him once, is about who shows up consistently, not who shares your DNA. After the presentation, Gordon walked Ruby through the executive offices, pointing out the subtle indicators of success he'd learned to read over the years. See how Tyler keeps his desk? Gordon gestured toward their accountant's workspace. Everything organized, accessible, but not obsessively neat. That tells you he's detail-oriented but flexible. And Cameron? Ruby asked, studying their foreman's cluttered office. Cameron's desk is chaos, but he can find any document in 30 seconds. He thrives on control disorder. Different systems work for different people. They paused outside Gordon's corner office, with its panoramic view of downtown Chicago. The city sprawled below them, a testament to the empire Gordon had built through determination and ruthlessness. Is this going to be mine someday? Ruby asked quietly. If you want it, Gordon replied. But you'll earn it, not inherit it. I didn't build this company to hand it over to someone unprepared. Good, Ruby said with satisfaction. I wouldn't want it any other way. Gordon's phone buzzed with a text from Cameron. O'Connor showed up at the West Side site asking about Ruby. Security escorted him off the property. It was the 3rd time in 2 months that Jason had tried to approach Ruby through her school or Gordon's construction sites. Each attempt had been met with swift legal consequences. Problem? Ruby asked, noticing Gordon's expression. Nothing I can't handle, Gordon assured her. Let's talk about your college plans. They'd moved to his office when Ruby's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and frowned. It's my mom, she said. Melody, I mean. Should I answer? That's your choice, Gordon said carefully. He learned not to forbid contact, but to trust Ruby's judgment about the people who had betrayed them both. Ruby answered the call, putting it on speaker without Gordon's prompting. a level of trust and inclusion that never failed to move him. "Ruby, honey, I've been trying to reach you for weeks." Melody's voice was strained, desperate. "Please, can we just talk?" "We're talking now," Ruby replied coolly. "I mean in person. I know you're angry, but I'm still your mother." "No, you're not," Ruby interrupted. "Mothers don't give their children away to hide affairs. Mothers don't let fathers think their children are dead. You're the woman who gave birth to me, but that's all." "Ruby, please. Is there something specific you need?" Ruby's voice was pure Gordon Mackey, polite but impatient. Jason and I have been talking. We want to try to be a family. All of us together." The silence that followed was electric. Gordon watched Ruby's face transform from mild annoyance to genuine anger. "You want to be a family," Ruby repeated slowly. "After 16 years, you suddenly want to be a family. It's not too late. It was too late 15 years ago when you chose deception over truth. It was too late every day you let Dad think I was dead. And it's definitely too late now that I know what real family looks like." Ruby ended the call and looked at Gordon with an expression of disgust. "They think they can just decide to be parents now that it's convenient," she said. "They have no idea what family actually means." Gordon felt a fierce protectiveness surge through him. "Do you want me to have a conversation with them? Make it clear that their attempts to contact you need to stop." "No," Ruby said thoughtfully. "I want to handle this myself, but I want to do it right. Permanently. What do you have in mind?" Ruby smiled, and Gordon recognized his own strategic thinking in her expression. "I want to legally change my name to Mackey. I want to formally establish that you're my father in every legal sense. And I want to make it clear to everyone, including them, that I've chosen my family." Gordon felt something unlock in his chest, a final piece of healing he hadn't realized he needed. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Legal adoption would cut all ties to your biological parents." "They cut those ties 15 years ago," Ruby said firmly. "I'm just making it official." That evening, Gordon sat in his study reviewing the legal documents Tyler had prepared for Ruby's adoption. At 16, she was old enough to consent to the process, and her biological parents' abandonment made the case straightforward. Ruby appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee, an evening ritual they'd established months ago. "I've been thinking about what Melody said," Ruby said, settling into her usual chair. "About it not being too late." Gordon looked up from the paperwork, concerned. "She's wrong," Ruby continued. "It's not about timing. It's about character. She and Jason are the same people they were 15 years ago. Selfish, irresponsible, and willing to sacrifice anything to avoid consequences." "And what kind of person are you?" Gordon asked. Ruby considered this seriously. "I'm the kind of person who understands that family is built through consistent actions, not genetics. I'm the kind of person who values truth over convenience. And I'm the kind of person who doesn't forgive betrayal." Gordon smiled with deep satisfaction. "You're my daughter." "Yes," Ruby said with quiet certainty. "I am." Outside, Chicago glittered in the darkness, a city of opportunities and challenges that would someday be part of Ruby's inheritance. But more than the business, more than the wealth, Gordon was leaving her something more valuable, the understanding that respect and love had to be earned, and that some betrayals were unforgivable. The next morning, they would file the adoption papers. Ruby Mackey would become official, and the last chapter of Melody and Jason's attempts at redemption would close forever. Some mistakes, Gordon had learned, cost everything, and some people never deserved a second chance. Chapter 8. Sins of the Mother. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, jarring Gordon from the first peaceful sleep he'd had in months. Ruby had been officially his daughter for 3 months now, the adoption finalized despite Melody and Jason's desperate legal challenges. But legal victory hadn't stopped their increasingly erratic attempts to force themselves back into Ruby's life. "Mr. Mackey?" The voice was professional, clinical. "This is Dr. Patricia Coleman at Northwestern Memorial. Your wife was brought in tonight after a car accident." Gordon sat up in bed, immediately alert. "How serious?" "She's stable, but there are complications. She was intoxicated when she crashed. There's also evidence she may have been attempting to harm herself." "I'll be right there." Gordon dressed quickly and knocked on Ruby's door. At 17 now, she'd become his closest advisor and confidant, helping run Mackey Construction with a natural business acumen that amazed even Gordon. "What's wrong?" Ruby appeared in her doorway, instantly awake. "Melody's in the hospital. Car accident." Ruby's expression showed no concern, only calculating analysis. "Suicide attempt. Possibly. Are you going to see her?" Gordon paused, studying his daughter's face. Over the past year, Ruby had shown no mercy toward the people who had betrayed them. She'd refused every attempt at reconciliation, dismissed every plea for forgiveness, and had specifically requested that neither Melody nor Jason be allowed any information about her life. "I think I should," Gordon said carefully. "Why?" Ruby's question was genuinely curious, not accusatory. "Because despite everything she's done, she was part of my life for 16 years. I need to understand why she's falling apart now." Ruby nodded. "Want me to come with you?" "No. This is something I need to handle alone." At the hospital, Gordon found Melody in a private room, her face bruised and her left arm in a cast. She looked older than her 43 years, worn down by months of failed attempts to reconnect with Ruby and the gradual disintegration of her relationship with Jason. "Gordon," she whispered when she saw him. "You came. What happened, Melody?" She turned away, unable to meet his eyes. "I was driving to Ruby's school. I know you've told him not to let me see her, but I thought if I could just talk to her for 5 minutes. You were stalking our daughter." "She's my daughter too." "No." Gordon's voice was ice cold. "You gave up that right 15 years ago. Ruby's made it clear she wants nothing to do with you." Melody began crying, ugly sobs that shook her entire body. "I made a mistake, Gordon. One mistake, and now I've lost everything. One mistake." Gordon's voice rose. "You had an affair, faked a miscarriage, gave away our child, and lied to my face for 15 years. That's not one mistake, Melody. That's a pattern of choices. I was young and scared. You were 27. You were a grown woman who chose deception over truth every single day for over a decade." Gordon studied his ex-wife. They divorced 6 months ago, another legal battle Melody had fought and lost, and felt nothing but cold disgust. "Jason left, didn't he?" Gordon said suddenly, reading the desperation in her face. Melody's sobs intensified. 2 months ago, he said I was obsessed with Ruby, that I needed to move on. He moved to California. Gordon wasn't surprised. Jason O'Connor had always run when things got complicated, and watching Ruby reject them both had clearly been more than he could handle. "So now you're alone," Gordon observed. "No husband, no daughter, no lover. Just the consequences of your choices." "Please," Melody whispered. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but could you ask Ruby to see me? Just once? I need her to know how sorry I am." Gordon looked at this broken woman who had once been his wife, who had once carried his dreams of family, and felt only satisfaction at her complete defeat. "Ruby doesn't need your apology," he said quietly. "She's building a life based on truth and integrity, qualities you've never understood. Your guilt is your burden to carry, not hers." "I'm dying, Gordon." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. "What?" "Liver cancer. Stage 4. I have maybe 6 months." Melody's voice was steady now, no longer crying. "That's why I crashed tonight. I wasn't trying to kill myself. I was trying to reach Ruby before it's too late." Gordon processed this information with the same methodical approach he brought to business problems. Melody dying changed nothing about what she'd done, but it might create complications for Ruby if she learned about it later. "Does Jason know?" "No. No one knows except the doctors and now you. And you want to use your cancer to manipulate Ruby into seeing you. I want to tell my daughter I love her before I die. She's not your daughter anymore. Legally, biologically, emotionally, she's mine. You made sure of that when you chose Jason over your family." Gordon stood to leave, then paused at the door. "But I'll tell her about your diagnosis. Not because you deserve her time, but because she deserves to make an informed choice about whether to see you." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Ruby will decide based on who you actually are, not who you claim to be. And we both know who you actually are, Melody." Gordon left his ex-wife alone in her hospital room, facing the consequences of a lifetime of selfish choices. Driving home through the empty Chicago streets, He felt no sympathy for her pain, no regret for his harsh words. Some people deserve to die alone. When he arrived home, Ruby was waiting in the kitchen with coffee and a plate of sandwiches. "How is she?" Ruby asked without preamble. "Dying. Liver cancer." Ruby absorbed this information without visible emotion. "How long?" 6 months, maybe less. "And she wants to see me?" "Yes." Ruby was quiet for several minutes, processing. Gordon waited, knowing better than to influence her decision. "What do you think I should do?" she asked finally. "I think you should do whatever will let you sleep peacefully for the rest of your life," Gordon said. "Neither forgiveness nor revenge will change what she took from us, but you need to decide which choice you can live with." Ruby nodded slowly. "I want to think about it. Take all the time you need." As Gordon watched his daughter grapple with this final test of her character, he felt proud of the young woman she'd become. Ruby Mackey would make her decision based on her own moral code, not on manipulation or guilt. And whatever she decided, Gordon would support her completely. After all, that's what real fathers did. Chapter 9. The Final Judgment. 3 weeks later, Ruby stood in the doorway of Melody's hospital room, studying the woman who had given birth to her with the same analytical gaze she used to evaluate construction projects. Gordon waited in the hallway, giving his daughter the space to make her own choice about this final confrontation. Melody looked fragile against the white hospital sheets, her skin yellow from liver failure, her once beautiful face gaunt with illness. She was awake, but clearly struggling, the cancer having progressed faster than anyone had expected. "Ruby," Melody whispered, her voice barely audible. "You came. I came to say goodbye," Ruby said, her tone neither cruel nor kind, simply matter of fact. "Dad told me you're dying. I'm so sorry, baby. For everything. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but—" "You're right," Ruby interrupted. "You don't." Melody's face crumpled, but Ruby continued with the relentless logic that had made her Gordon's perfect heir. "I've spent the last 3 weeks thinking about what you took from me. Not just the 15 years with Dad, but the foundation those years would have given me. The confidence that comes from knowing your father believes in you. The security that comes from understanding that family means something. I was trying to protect. You were protecting yourself." Ruby cut her off again. "Every choice you made was about avoiding consequences, avoiding difficult conversations, avoiding responsibility. You gave me away because keeping me would have been inconvenient." Melody tried to speak, but Ruby wasn't finished. "But here's what you need to understand before you die. Despite everything you took from me, I turned out exactly as I should have. Dad taught me that actions have consequences, that trust is earned, and that family is built through consistency and sacrifice. Everything you failed to give me, you provided. Please, Ruby, I love you." "No, you don't." Ruby's voice was steady, controlled. "Love requires sacrifice. Love means putting someone else's needs before your own. You've never loved anyone more than you love yourself." Gordon watched from the hallway as his daughter delivered this final judgment with the precision of a surgeon. There was no anger in her voice, no emotion at all, just the cold assessment of facts. "I came here because I wanted to look at you one more time and confirm what I already knew," Ruby continued. "That you're exactly the person I thought you were. Selfish, weak, and ultimately irrelevant to my life. Ruby, please. I'm not Ruby to you. I'm Ms. Mackey, and I'm here to tell you that your death changes nothing. You'll be forgotten as completely as you chose to forget your responsibilities as a mother." Ruby turned to leave, then paused. "There's one thing I want you to know before you die," she said without turning around. "I'm going to be extraordinary. I'm going to build something bigger than anything you could have imagined. I'm going to carry Dad's legacy forward and create my own empire. And none of it, not one single achievement, will have anything to do with you." With that, Ruby walked away, leaving Melody alone with the weight of her choices. In the hallway, Gordon fell in a step beside his daughter as they headed toward the elevator. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Complete," Ruby said simply. She needed to know that her confession didn't change anything, that her guilt wasn't my responsibility to resolve. "Any regrets?" "Only that it took 17 years to have that conversation." Gordon smiled with deep satisfaction. Ruby had passed the final test of her character, choosing clarity over sentiment, justice over false mercy. Melody died 4 days later, alone except for the nursing staff. Neither Gordon nor Ruby attended the funeral, though they learned from Tyler Wells that Jason had returned from California for the service. Fewer than a dozen people attended, a testament to the shallow relationships Melody had cultivated throughout her life. 1 month after the funeral, Ruby stood before the Mackey Construction Board of Directors in her first official capacity as Vice President of Strategic Development. At 17, she was the youngest executive in the company's history, but her presentation commanded the same respect Gordon's decisions had earned over decades. The Millennium Commerce Center represents our largest undertaking to date, Ruby explained, her voice carrying the confidence of someone born to lead. But it's also our opportunity to establish Mackey Construction as the premier commercial developer in the Midwest. Vincent Carney, now in his 60s but still sharp, leaned forward with interest. The investment is substantial. What's your risk assessment? Minimal, Ruby replied without hesitation. We've secured anchor tenants for 60% of the space before breaking ground, and our construction timeline accounts for every variable Dad's taught me to consider. Gordon watched his daughter command the room with the same authority he'd spent decades developing, and felt the deep satisfaction of a legacy secured. Ruby Mackey would take his empire further than he'd ever imagined possible. After the meeting, they stood together on the construction site where it all began, where Gordon had first hired Jason O'Connor, where he'd started building the fortune that would become Ruby's inheritance. Any word from Jason? Ruby asked casually. Tyler heard he's working construction in San Diego. Apparently, he's been asking around about you. Let him ask. Ruby's smile was sharp as winter. He'll learn the same lesson everyone else has learned. I choose my family, and I don't choose him. Gordon put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. Looking out over the Chicago skyline, they would soon reshape with their new development. Are you happy? He asked. Ruby considered the question seriously, as she considered everything. I'm exactly where I belong, she said finally. With exactly the father I was meant to have, building exactly the life I was meant to live. And the people who betrayed us, they got exactly what they deserved, Ruby said with quiet finality. Nothing. Gordon Mackey had spent his entire adult life believing that some betrayals were unforgivable, that some people never deserved second chances. His daughter had proven him right in every way that mattered. In the end, family wasn't about genetics or biology. It was about showing up consistently, earning trust through actions, and choosing to love someone even when, especially when, the world tried to tear you apart. Gordon and Ruby Mackey had chosen each other. Everyone else had simply revealed who they really were. And in Gordon's world, that was the only justice that mattered. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.